I'm writing the same story. And there's just different angles of approach for the same story. And it turns out that the COVID response in the West, specifically in the Five Eyes countries, is almost the same story. There's just a couple of different players.
For sure. And I agree. I mean, I was talking to Whitney on Message yesterday about, the various things that we were going to be collaborating on in the next couple of weeks.
And I can't wait for that.
Yeah, I mean, I love working with Whitney. It's a really great partnership. We just feed off each other and, it really works well. But I agree. I think what we're actually seeing is our own governments deploying the hybrid war strategy against us. If we look at what's happening in the UK, I mean, I'm more informed, obviously, on what's going on in the UK, but I think it pretty much mirrors what's going on in the US. You have the fact that people are basically under house arrest. They're being forced into a position where they're more dependent on the state. So effectively what we have now is a kind of feudal capitalist state, creating this codependency among probably 60% of its population financially, and the creation of what I call this kind of healthcare tyranny that's coming into being right now. We're having our self-determination from a medical perspective completely stripped away from us. I mean, the threat of immunity passports, of contact tracing, of mandatory vaccines is a very, very real threat right now. And this is scary because then you get into the DARPA stuff. Then you get into what Whitney's been talking about, the gene altering drugs, the surveillance drugs, the ID 2020, the biometric identification elements are coming in. And suddenly this is 1984. This is like Aldous Huxley on steroids, right? Yeah. And I was talking to another good friend of mine today, Mike Robinson of UK Column News, and I highly recommend everyone following them. They've done some fantastic work, especially yesterday's news program. Please watch it, because it's astounding what they picked up. I mean, Britain has been the world expert and exporter, actually, of behavioral insight, of the ability to socially engineer entire campaigns. I mean, I always say in Syria, the intelligence campaign is not being waged by America, it's being waged by Britain. It's being funded by America, and it's being kind of overarched by America with the muscle and the brawn and the military equipment and so on. But it's Britain that is always the intelligence mastermind behind everything. And it is exactly that's happening now in the UK. We have behavioral insights organizations that are nudging the public in the direction that the government wants it to go in. And of course, what we see is, particularly what I focused on are who actually was engineering the British government response to COVID-19. Why did we go from like zero to this unbelievable kind of house arrest, social distancing? I mean, to be honest, I had about a week where my jaw just dropped, and I was like, how the hell did that happen so fast, And even people who'd been on the same side with me in Syria, who'd always been, in solidarity with anti-imperialist projects, with genuine anti-war activism, suddenly split away. Suddenly I was the weirdo. I was the conspiracy theorist. I was the murderer who was bringing about the death of everyone because I was saying, no, we shouldn't lock down. This is insane.
I had two friends yesterday that say in different parts of the country, tell me that they had been accused of attempted murder because they got out of their car in a parking lot and their mask wasn't on. And then I see a post on Facebook like 10 minutes later. Can we call the cops on people who aren't wearing? And I'm like, Do you not see what's happening here? Like I always say that we don't have governments that run intelligence agencies. We have intelligence agencies that run governments. And what we have here is the implementation of like the global Stasi, where your neighbors are being given snitch apps, and like they're being told it by state governors, by celebrities on TV, by everyone with a blue check on Twitter. Like this is the new normal now. You're the new normal means you have to, I love in France how you have to wear a mask, but they still ban the burqa. We live in a fucking cartoon.
Actually, that's a really interesting point, because a Yemeni friend of mine, he said to me, all I can think about when I see everyone in these masks is Wahhabism. He said, everyone's just suddenly gone to the veil.
Yep.
He said, this is unbelievable. Like all these years they've been fighting against this terrorism. Now everyone is basically covering up.
Yeah. All the time I say that we live in a fucking cartoon, and every day there's just reason after reason after reason that makes me go, oh my God, I was fucking right. We have a question in the chat. What do you think of George Galloway?
Oh.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one.
I've got mixed opinions on this too. I do.
Right. Well, look, dear old George, the thing is with George Galloway, he's an opportunist. I'm going to put it out there. He's an opportunist. He changes his mind when public consensus goes his way, right? So I think what we saw was in the beginning, many erstwhile colleagues and many people who'd been on, his platform, whether it was with Sputnik or various others that he does, were a little bit surprised at his vehement protectionism of a government narrative. I mean, what I actually find slightly amusing now is that Tony Blair has come onto the scene. Tony Blair Institute has come on as the global expert that is going to be advising on the pandemic recovery. So my comment is, so right, how does that sit with George Galloway right now, So I think, coming back to a more serious point, I think every one of us who would genuinely, look, I would like nothing better than to be wrong about what I'm saying about COVID-19 and what I think is our future and what I think the governments are trying to do to us. I would love to be wrong. I don't go into this to be right. I don't go into this to be a big guy or to be anything. There's nothing ego-based in this. I'm just going into it because I'm actually, initially when it all started, I was a bit scared. I was like, what the hell is going on? Yeah. So you start to look into it. You start to investigate. That's my job, right? I don't put stuff out there that's sensationalist or is not researched or is not evidenced, ever. I try not to. I'm not saying I won't make mistakes. We all do. But everything I do is from a genuine base. And so when I basically challenged Galloway on Twitter and I said to him, look, I'm a little bit disappointed and saddened that you're taking this stance, that you're basically attacking people like me, that you should know by now, we're not here for any agenda. We're not here for any sort of self-aggrandizement. We're here simply to try and research what the hell is going on. Yeah. Block. And I mean, he pretty much blanket blocked anyone who challenged the official narrative.
On his show a couple of months ago. He did. It was a great interview, too. It was. And they had a lovely conversation, and I think he preemptively blocked Patrick.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was the most bizarre thing. But then, when I look at the history, then maybe it's not so bizarre. And I've noticed now, I mean, I was talking with Eva Bartlett yesterday, and I think she's kind of digging a little bit deeper into what he's been saying and, and how much he's changed. And of course, now he is, which is a fairly typical pattern with Galloway. He's now backtracking a little bit
Yeah.
and starting to kind of, add in a few bits that we were all saying right from the beginning. So we'll probably see him, flip-flop back our way again at some point.
Yeah.
But
I think so here's the thing, and I think this may be what drove it, because right before this broke, he started the Workers' Party, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're the face of the Workers' Party, and it's the workers who are being hardest hit by all of this, you're probably going to over pander to protect in your mind what is protecting the base of your political party. And this isn't something where, look, if you're not already in a position of real or perceived power, what you ultimately think about this isn't going to help drive the response. In my mind, this is a live fire exercise.
Yeah.
And there are not just going to be COVID related casualties. This is going to be the precursor to rounding up dissidents.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And the extradition of Julian Assange is pivotal in this. If we can stop that, we may be able to stop the dissident roundup as a result. But if he's used as an example and the precedent is set that anyone who publishes writes about anything that doesn't, go along with the official narrative is subject to any country's version of the Espionage Act, we're fucked. And
well, I mean, we're seeing it come into play right now, right? I mean, the YouTube censorship, the Facebook censorship, the Vimeo censorship. I mean, Judy Mikovitz's video, the two doctors, Dr. Erickson's, every time I tried to upload that onto any platform, it was removed seconds after it went up. And YouTube CEO has already said they're removing anything which doesn't comply with the WHO diktat. But the problem is that the WHO diktat keeps changing also. They keep switching. So, I mean, this is absolute. But if people cannot see, let's get one thing straight. Okay, there is a virus. People are dying, but they're not dying in greater numbers than under any other flu epidemic that we've had. I mean, in fact, the numbers are lower, and there's no spike coming unless, of course, they manufacture one. What we're actually seeing now in almost every country is a flattening off, is a dropping of the numbers, is an end of the epidemic, right? I mean, we're seeing that almost universally, country to country. Lockdown or no lockdown. Because funnily enough, we're coming out of the flu season, we're coming into the end of the flu season, we're coming into the hot weather, etc., etc. I mean, take Syria, for example. We've had less than 50 cases here. We've had 3 deaths. I mean, that's actually a pretty good season for, for a country that's 10 years at war, under sanctions, still being targeted by Israel, America, and the various terrorist proxy groups, right? So fundamentally, I'm not downplaying any of the deaths, but let's face the fact that probably the majority of these deaths are in care homes of the elderly that have been abandoned and isolated and left without and neglected, unable to get into hospital, forced to sign DNR notices so they won't be resuscitated anyway, even if they are taken into hospital, right? And for me, this is what people should be outraged about, not calling me a murderer, because I'm pointing out the nefarious activity of my government that's driving, or agencies that are driving my government response to COVID-19, and the absolutely horrifying effect, 1.6 million benefit claims in a 2-week period in the UK, right? Yeah. 50% of the world workforce is likely to be left without a livelihood. Millions of children thrown into poverty. In Britain, we already had sort of pre-Victorian poverty levels for children, right, in 2019. It had increased from 2012. God knows what it will be now. Now we have the authoritarian measures coming into schools. I mean, have you seen the recent schools reopening and the kids having to stay 2 meters apart, and in like painted squares, they're playing in squares, they're not allowed to touch each other? I mean, if people cannot see the absolute insanity of this response in contrast to the actual severity of it, and the number of experts, epidemiologists and experts and doctors, medical experts, scientific analysts, all of whom are saying this is not a pandemic. We should not be on lockdown. We should not be responding in this way. And every single one of them is being censored. Why? If our government were genuine in trying to put forward a positive response to COVID-19, why wouldn't they take into account conflicting opinions? Why are they only relying upon a scientific clique that are providing them with the information they want, like Neil Ferguson, Imperial College, funded by Gates, funded by various global immunization organizations like Wellcome Trust, like Gates, like SAPI, like Gavi, etc., right? And Ferguson, whose own model was so archaic. I mean, there's now, I'm not a computer expert by any means, but I've had people contact me saying, look, we've managed to basically to look at the how do I even say it? To look at the actual model that he used, and it's ancient. It's no longer relevant. It's not even, and he has a failure. He has 100% failure record. 2001, foot and mouth disease, failed. 12 million animals killed. Swine flu, failed. Avian flu, failed. Mad cow disease, failed. You know, he was predicting tens of thousands of deaths, maybe a few hundred, you know, in each case. So the guy is a failure. He's an abject failure. And yet on his model, right, the government went to war against its people. So effectively, and then, of course, he walked away from the SAGE team because he was caught with his lover, assuming that he had immunity because he'd had COVID-19. So he just blew the entire the Gates argument out of the water, right?